Erev Tov. Okay, so Erev Tov. So we are starting now with Birkot Hashachar on page 18. So last week what we started, okay, for those who are joining now. So last week what we started to go over the Siddur more in detail, okay, so that we can get a bit of a better in-depth understanding, okay. And we talked originally more in broad terms of everything that we're discussing, and now we're going to focus some of the stuff that we do say in our Bet Knesset, some of the stuff that we do not, but that we say by ourselves in the morning before we come. So today the focus that we're going to focus on is Birkot Hashachar, okay, the blessings, the morning blessings, and we're going to go through them. Last week we talked about Modani and Birkot Torah. So we said Modani is our way of waking up, and the first words out of our mouth are thank you. Then we come to the synagogue, or according to other opinions, we also say them as part of our morning routine, and we say the brachot that are saying specific things of thank you. The other prayer that's on the top of this page, Elohai Neshama, we won't get into it in depth, but just to be familiarized with it, Elohai Neshama shenatata bi te'orahi. My God, the soul that you've given inside of me, it's pure. Ata berata, you've created it. Ata yetzarta, ata nefachta bi, you breathed it into me. Ve'ata meshamra b'kirbi, and you are keeping it and protecting it inside of me. Ve'ata atid litla mimeni, and you are going to eventually take it back from me. Litol, lakachat. So you are going to take it away from me, right? So you take it away from me when I'm going to die. You will take away my neshama. Ulachzira bi la'atid lavo, and you will give it, and you will put it, you will give it back to me in the days to come of the resurrection of the dead. כל זמן שהנשמה בקרבי מודה אני לפניך, השם אלוקיי ואלוקי אבותיי, ריבון כל המעשים, אדון כל הנשמות. As long as I have my neshama inside of me, I will give thanks to you. And then there's a lot of different praises, and it ends with the master of all of the neshamot. Baruch ata Hashem, machzir neshamot lifgarim metiv. Bless you, Hashem, the one who restores souls to dead bodies. Right. So we talked about this a little bit in Modani. Just to repeat it, because there's a lot of Jewish philosophy that goes into this sentence or into this prayer, is our neshama, right? When I ask, who are you, right? Or who am I? Am I my physical body? Am I my mind, my thoughts, my feelings, right? Or is there something that is deeper than that is who I am? And the Jewish answer to that is it's the neshama. The soul itself is who I am, right? I am not just my memories, I'm not just my thoughts, I'm definitely not my body, right? And when I die, well, what happens to me, right? Who am I? What happens to me when I die? Well, my neshama goes back to the realm of neshamot. That is where it belongs. So it came from there, and it will go back to there. And according to also the mystical side in Judaism, it also talks about that whenever we go to sleep, our neshama goes and leaves our body and goes to that realm and returns in the morning, right? And this is why we wash our hands in the morning to remove the same concept of when we leave a cemetery, right? Is we came in contact with death, right? While we're sleeping, we came in contact with death, and therefore when we wake up, we wash our yadayim, and then we can start our day. Can't do anything else until we wash our hands. So so this whole prayer over here is in a way modani, but with God's name. So after I washed my hands, after I put on, I got dressed, now I can pray. The modani I say while I'm still in bed in pajamas, before I wash my hands, before I started my day. Then I finish that, and now I'm getting into specifics. So there are 18 blessings. 18 blessings over here, and there's a lot of different ways, again, to look at it. There's one idea that says It's 18 like the 18 units in your spine, and just like how they hold you up physically, this is what holds you up spiritually. These 18 blessings that I'm going to start my day out with, so that when I'm praying and I'm blessing, I'm going to have, I'm guiding myself in this way. There's a book called Chovat HaLevavot. Chovat HaLevavot, in essence, what is my responsibility towards God, written by Rabbeinu Bechayei. And he says the essence of Judaism, of all of Judaism, is Hakarat HaTov. Hakarat HaTov, giving gratitude, right? Appreciating what I have. So I start out my morning, first words out of my mouth, Modeh Ani, thank you, right? Thank you that I woke up. Then I start getting ready. What do I say immediately afterwards? Well, I say Elohai Neshama, which is another version of Modeh Ani. And then I start getting into specifics. Now, what are these specifics? So we'll read all of them soon, but just so that you hear a few of them. Pokeach Ivrim, that you open up our eyes, the eyes of the blind, right? So the eyes of the blind, my eyes were closed at night, now they're opened. That I have the capability of seeing, in general. That I have clothes, that I can walk, right? Things that we look at and we take them very, very for granted. We happen to have quite a lot of actually blessings that you would take for granted. Go back for a second to page 14. Page 14, on the bottom, has two blessings. One blessing is a blessing of Al Netilat Yadayim. I wash my hands in the morning, right? And then I make the blessing. We talked about this last time. Page 14 on the bottom. And the other one is the blessing for when I leave the bathroom, okay? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, just like how all blessings start. Asher yatzar et ha'adam bechokma, uvara vo nekavim nekavim chalulim chalulim. That God created the man with wisdom, and He created many different types of holes, okay, cavities, and they are hollow. Galui v'yadua lifnei kiseh kevodecha. It is known before your throne. She'imi patach echad mehem, if one of them will open up. Or one will shut. According to most texts. So if something that is opened closes, or something that is closed opens, we wouldn't be able to exist. And therefore, I'm thanking you, God, that you have created man with your wisdom. So Avital, her first job as in the medical field, she worked in dialysis. And she said, we grow up saying these blessings. You grow up religious, you grow up saying all of these blessings your entire life, and you don't give it much thought, right? And then she said, then I'm in dialysis, and I see people who can't go to the bathroom, right? Their kidneys aren't working. Their tubes are shut. That's it. You're done. If there isn't dialysis, they're dead within a few days. That's the story. That's all of it, right? And you understand, there's things that are supposed to be open. If they're closed, you die. If it's closed and it opens up, right? You have a hernia, you have, an appendicitis, you have something like that, it can kill you, right? So all of these things, we have prayers for what seems to us as pretty much a given, okay? We say this in Shmona Esrei. We say, Al nisecha shebechol yom imanu, modim anachnu lach. Right? When we're saying thank you in the end of the Amidah, of the silent prayer, we're saying thank you for all of the regular miracles that are happening. Not saying thank you for God for splitting the sea, or for stopping, the sun and the moon in the middle of the day for Yehoshua to fight his battle and shower burning rocks down, or all of the plagues. That's not the miracles that we're thankful for. Those are big miracles, once in a history kind of miracles. But the real miracles that we thank God for are the fact that we're alive, right? That every single second of our existence is a miracle. And we learn to appreciate it and say thank you for all that, okay? So there's two different opinions, okay? There's everybody's opinion, and then there's Maimonides, okay? So the Yemenites hold by Maimonides, but everybody else pretty much goes with the other opinions that say like this. There's these 18 blessings. Besides the first, not the first one, but the three afterwards, okay? All of them you should say as they are happening. So the Rambam says, when they are happening, you open your eyes, you say Pokeach Ivrim. You get dressed, you say Malbish Harumim. You put on your shoes, you make a blessing, right? Like every single thing, make a blessing as it's happening. In other words, Maimonides' approach to this is based in a way off of what Rabbeinu Bechaye says, which is gratitude. Everything that you're doing, make a blessing on, as opposed to the coming to the synagogue and just reading it as a text, right? Don't just come and read it as a part of the regular ritual of the prayers, but rather stop and say, whatever I'm doing now, appreciate it and make the blessing for it. Okay, matir asurim, okay, that you break the shackles of the prisoners, right? We can't move at night, and now we could move. Now we're free again. So all of these kinds of blessings, that is how Maimonides says that we say them. Ashkenazim and Sfaradim do not hold like that. Some Yemenites do, and say it as part of their morning routine. So now we'll start reading them from the top. So page 18, the first blessing over there. First blessing, we're going to skip the introduction for each one of them. So just Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, like all the blessings. Asher Natan lasichvi vina lehavchin ben yom uven laila. Bless you, Hashem, that you gave the rooster the intelligence to tell the difference between morning and night, right? So the rooster wakes up, the first animal that wakes up, and is so proud of himself that he spots that there's light, and he starts making noise, right? This is not a very intellectual creature. This is not, what we look at for science experiments to see, IQ or how their brains are working. This is an animal that you throw seeds on the floor and it goes around pecking and hits more than it picks up, because it's just trying to, randomly guess. So it's not an animal that's known for its intelligence. But the blessing over here is, God, you've given intelligence even to the dumbest creatures, right? In other words, thank you, God, for the most basics of intelligence. This is not that you've made me Einstein. This is not that I'm, going to make any big revolutions, but that I have enough brain cells to function. Basic. The next three, we'll get to them soon. Okay, I'm gonna skip them on purpose. I want to get back to them. Then we have Pokeach Ivrim, that you've opened the eyes of the blind. So your eyes are closed during the night. You wake up in the morning and you open them up. And this also is the halakha that we say. Even a blind person says Pokeach Ivrim, because even though he can't physically see, others can see, and the fact that sight exists in the world, right, is of benefit to him. And therefore, even a blind person would say Pokeach Ivrim. Matir asurim, the next one. Malbish harumim. Okay, that God clothes the naked, right? So now we have again the basic. This is not saying thank you that I have an Armani suit, right? This is saying thank you that I have the most basic of clothing. We also remember this from Yaakov. When Yaakov travels and he's escaping from Esav, he makes a covenant with God. If God gives him bread and clothes to wear, right? He's not asking for meat. He's not asking for royalty. He's not asking for anything fancy. He's asking for the bare minimum, right? So remembering that the bare minimum is what we need. Everything else afterwards is a bonus. Everything else afterwards we are thankful for, but that is not what we need to be asking for. The next one, Matir asurim, okay? That God frees those who are bound, who are prisoners, okay? And there's actually a chemical in our brain that does let off, that will lock your muscles in place at night in specific parts of your sleep, in your REM sleep, so that you don't act out your dreams, okay? So if people with a disorder that their brain does not secrete that chemical, what ends up happening is they sleepwalk, right? They move around in their sleep because they're actually acting out in a way their dreams. So we are frozen. We're basically statues at night, and now we are free. Zokef kefufim, that God straightens our back, that we are able to stand up straight. Again, how you sleep at night, you're bent over, you wake up, now you can rise. Roka haaretz al hamayim, we're on page 20. That God gives us steady ground to walk on. Okay. Hamachin mitzadei gaver, that God gives us shoes that we can walk everywhere. Right. Imagine life without shoes, and everything, that all the injuries that come with it. So hamachin mitzadei gaver she'asa ozer Yisrael bigvura. Okay, that God gives us the power to fight our evil inclination. Okay, the all of our temptations, and hanoten layaf koach, that God gives power to those who are asleep. God gives us energy to those who are tired, and some people also count the next one as hama'avir shena me'enai utnuma me'afapai. Okay, which is already in the next paragraph, that God wakes us up and removes the sleep from our eyes. Okay, so these ones that we read are very basic. I'm not asking for anything more than what's over here. I'm just asking for the most basic things. Then we have 3 over here, going back to the page beforehand, that you did not make me, for not making me a Gentile, for not making me a slave, and men say for not making me a woman, and women say that you made me that you made me according to His will. Okay, that God made me according to His will. So you have a lot of different discussions that come up from these 3. First of all, when we're going back to Rabbeinu Bechayei's approach, which we're going to keep on repeating and going over, of gratitude, right? Appreciating what we have. What do I have? I have my freedom to be able to worship. Okay? I have my freedom to be able to worship God. There was a discussion that we had in the synagogue on Shabbat of why does God tell Abraham that his descendants will be enslaved so that they could be freed, right? Like, why just not have us enslaved? Why not just give us the Torah without us needing to go through all of Egypt? And there were different opinions that were brought up and different ideas, but one of them that was brought up by my Abba was an opinion that says we needed to be able to be slaves to a physical human being, to a king, so that we would know how to be able to worship God, right? To know how to follow orders. Okay, and there's a yeshiva in Bat Ain, near where I grew up, that they don't accept people into the learning program, into the yeshiva, unless they already did the army, because you need to know how to follow orders. If you don't know how to follow orders, how can you worship God, right? How can you worship God if you can't listen to something because you are told to do so? And then the yeshiva also doesn't let you stay there for past 2 years unless you get married. Because if you don't know what love is, how can you love God, right? So we have all these things that are in our physical realm that we elevate. So over here, he says, I need to be able to understand that my freedom gives me the freedom to worship God. So I want these obligations, I want these commandments to be able to do things. Non-Jews have 7 commandments, the Noahide laws. Are Jews better than non-Jews? Okay, this is a question that is brought up through in different theologies. The only ones who've ever said Jews say that Jews are better than non-Jews are anti-Semites. Okay, it was a very big anti-Semitic thing of saying Jews are saying that this and this and this and this. The only one of the Rishonim, of the commentaries that looks at it in that way and says that there's a real hierarchy difference between Jews and non-Jews, and that is Rav Yehuda Levi and the Kuzari. Everybody else says there is no hierarchy. God creates man, what does it say? B'tselem Elohim bara et ha'adam, in God's image. Therefore, Jews and non-Jews both have the same humanity to them. Spirituality, Jews have a higher spirituality, okay? Jews have a higher spirituality. But as far as humanity, there is no hierarchy. Avraham Avinu, was he Jewish? Okay? According to the majority of the commentaries, Avraham Avinu, Yitzchak Avinu, Yaakov Avinu, all of them were Noahites. They were Noahites that decided to do more. Am I holier than Avraham? Am I holier than Yitzchak? Am I holier than Sarah and Rivka? Right? Is my place now as a Jewish person in a higher place than those who were not Jewish? Right? So no, so they had a very high place in their hierarchy because they elevated themselves. But they didn't have the obligation to do those things. Okay? So let's hold on to the word obligation for a second. Let's move on to a slave. Okay? A slave is not free to do what he wants. The first mitzvah that we get in the Torah, okay, we get the mitzvah of deciding when Rosh Chodesh is, the new month. If you decide when the new month is, effectively you decide when Rosh Hashanah is, Yom Kippur is, Pesach, right? If you eat chametz on Pesach, you are excommunicated. If you're not fasting on Yom Kippur, you're excommunicated, right? This is what the Torah tells us. And we get to decide when Yom Kippur is. We get to decide when Pesach is. We don't get to decide when Shabbat is, right? That is already decided by the days of the week. But we do get to decide the days of the month. When do we get this mitzvah? We get this mitzvah while we're still slaves in Egypt. Why do we get the mitzvah while we're still slaves in Egypt? Because the first thing to get your freedom is take control over your time. Take control over what do I want to do? How do I want to worship? Who do I want to worship? Right? If I have a master, I'm not free. So God frees us so we can be free to worship Him. Okay? So while we're slaves over here, so if I say, thank you God for not making me a slave, means if I was a slave, I wouldn't have the ability or the obligation to be able to worship. Okay? Now, let's go into a different terminology for slave. A non-Jew would like to sell himself into slavery to a Jewish person. According to halakha, he goes through, or she goes through, a form of conversion that is incomplete. And then the slave to the Jewish person has obligations to do certain commandments, not all of them, certain ones. Once the slave goes free, they are Jewish completely. The last step of their conversion is the freedom, is being set free. Okay? There's a story in the Gemara of Rabban Gamliel setting his servant free so that he would have a minion, right? So that he would have, a 10th man for his minion, because they were 9 and his slave was there, so he sets him free and now he counts for a minion, right? So you can look at it in many, many different ways. Slavery is very different what the Torah was talking about and what the Tanakh talks about when it talks about slavery, and also it's not a reality that we're very familiar with today to be able to understand this. But if I were to be a slave, I wouldn't have the ability or the obligation to keep these mitzvot. Now, men and women in Judaism do not have any difference according to halakha, except for one category, which are mitzvot aseh shazman grama, positive mitzvahs that are time-bound, time-specific. There's only 14 of those mitzvahs in the Torah. Only 14 out of the 613 mitzvahs that men and women are different in. This obviously structures a lot of things in the synagogue. This structures things around the holidays, right? But it's very, very, very specific. So women don't have the obligation to do these mitzvot. There is a with all of these things, we have a concept called gadol mitzuveh ve'oseh mishe'eno mitzuveh ve'oseh. It is bigger, a bigger mitzvah for the person who has the obligation to do something than for a person who doesn't have the same obligation to do it. In other words, in your own house, you don't enjoy doing dishes, right? Because you need to do the dishes. But you go over to a friend's house, you'll do the dishes. Why? Because no one's making you do the dishes. As soon as you don't have an obligation to do something, it's very, very easy. But when you are being told you must do this, now it gets hard. So when you don't have an obligation, okay, when you don't have an obligation, this also is a lot of the halacha around why women don't count for a minyan and why women are not the ones that make kiddush. They can make hamotzi, they're not the ones making kiddush for the family, and they can't read Megillah for men or things like that. It's because they don't have the obligation to do that, and therefore they can't exempt someone who does have the obligation. Anyone who has the same obligation can exempt everyone, right? So if husband and wife both have the same obligation to make the blessing on the challah on Shabbat, either one of them can do it because they have the same obligation. But kiddush, in the words of kiddush, it talks about the fact that it is a time-specific mitzvah. The man has an obligation to do so, the woman doesn't. So if the woman makes the blessing on the kiddush, the man would have to afterwards again make the blessing to be exempt. She could exempt other women, okay? So you have a lot of communities that would have, let's say, a Megillah reading, right, for Purim, that a woman would read for other women, but not a woman reading for other men, okay?
So what about like in it's also specific time and the women are doing it?
So it's not a mitzvah from the Torah, okay? And it's a mitzvah that it is a mitzvah from rabbinic law, okay? And it is a mitzvah that is by definition a woman's mitzvah, okay? It is by definition considered a woman's mitzvah. So you have mitzvot that are specific.
From the Torah specifically, it's men usually.
Specifically, it's men, right? So if the Torah gives a specific, if the Torah says here is a mitzvah that you need to do, Besukot tishvu shivat yamim, right? You must sit in the sukkah for 7 days. Who is it referring to? Men. If the Torah says men, women, and children, then women also have that obligation. Okay? There's I brought into the Bet Knesset actually quite a few of these books called Sefer HaMitzvot. Okay? Sefer HaMitzvot, the books of mitzvahs, and it's the 613 mitzvahs. I brought a few different versions of them by different authors. The Rambam writes one. The Sefer HaMitzvot, Sefer Chinuch writes one. Okay, so all of them categorize the mitzvahs. And for each one of the mitzvahs, they say, here is the mitzvah. It is a positive mitzvah or a negative mitzvah. Okay, mitzvat aseh or mitzvat lo ta'aseh. And here is who is obligated to do this, right? To make it very, very clear. So when the blessing over here that I'm saying, shelo asani isha, that you didn't make me a woman, is if I were a woman, I wouldn't have an obligation to do this. And I'm thanking God for the obligation, right, the responsibility to doing more commandments. Same thing is for not being a Gentile, not being a slave. All of these things limit me in what commandments I can do. Now, also women, also slaves, also Gentiles are all allowed to do more than what is scripted, right? To an extent. Okay? So for example, we have the Noahite group, the B'nai Noach. This is a community in Kenya that are living as non-Jews, believing in the Torah, believing in one God. They believe that this is the right thing to do, right? But they are not going through a conversion. So what I sit and I teach them, and often they'll ask, I'll say, am I allowed to sit in a sukkah? I said, yes, you're allowed to sit in a sukkah. You don't have to sit in a sukkah. You can build yourself a sukkah. You can eat matzah. But if you think you have an obligation to do so, that's where it's wrong, right? Can you keep Shabbat? Not really. Can you rest on Shabbat? Sure. If you decide that you are going to keep Shabbat completely as a non-Jew to benefit yourself in your own religion, right? You have created a new religion, and worse than that, you're stealing something that is not yours, okay? The word that we use for Shabbat, for example, is brit, covenant. There is a covenant between God and the Jewish people, right? And that's why we need to keep the Shabbat. You're not allowed to come into a covenant, into someone else's covenant, right? It's the same thing as a husband and wife have a covenant, and therefore they can be intimate together. And if someone else got into that bed and said, but there's a covenant. No, it's not your covenant. You're not allowed to go and cross that line. This is a covenant between God and his people. And therefore, no one else is allowed to keep Shabbat and say, I have an obligation to do so. So much so that in the beginning of Christianity, they were still keeping Shabbat on the seventh day. And there was a movement, a Jewish movement actually, to push Christianity to start keeping Sunday as opposed to on Shabbat itself, so that we would differentiate the two religions and not say that we're the same. Okay, so with all of these things, there are boundaries, right? So a non-Jew can come and pray and praise God and pray. That's fine, right? A non-Jew can decide to have matzah on Pesach and join a Seder, right? A non-Jew can decide to rest on Shabbat, and a non-Jew can decide to do a lot more than the 7 commandments. When does it become a problem? When they look at it and say, well, I actually have 613 commandments because it says so in the Torah. No, it doesn't talk about it for you, it talks about it for us, right? So with slaves and servants, it's a little bit less relevant, okay? But for women, when is it crossing a line? It crosses a line when it goes into something that you are not allowed to do, okay? So for example, a man wears tzitzit, wears a talit, wears a kippah, wears tefillin, right? All of these things are men's clothing. And if a woman were to go and say, I am going to wear this, okay, then it's not doing more than you're allowed, it's crossing over into a negative mitzvah, an isur, mitzvah lo ta'aseh, of lo yilbash, of a woman is not allowed to wear men's clothes, and men are not allowed to wear women's clothes, right? And this falls into those categories, okay? So it's finding that balance, that line of what is permissible, what is not, and we are, and that sums up on the men's side. The women say, "Sha'asani kirtzano," that God created me in His will. Okay, for having made me according to His will, right? So there's a lot of different commentaries and a lot of different ways of looking at it. The one that I've always connected the most with has to do with the fact that why do men have an obligation to do more mitzvahs, to wear certain things that women do not have the obligation to? It's because men need more reminders than women do. Woman is created more spiritual, more connected to God in her natural state. Okay, some people look at it and say that is what the emotional IQ, right? Like the emotional IQ is, right? Like that's where that is, right? And it's about being more elevated, more connected in that way, and therefore women need to do less, right? So a woman doesn't need to daven in a minyan because she could pray by herself. Okay, a man, if there is a minyan in town, needs to go and pray with that minyan because he can't pray by himself if there is a minyan of men. Okay, but a woman doesn't have that obligation because a woman herself is more spiritual, so doesn't need as many commandments, doesn't need as many restraints. Okay, because she's created in that kind of image. So this finishes with the brachot. And we're going back to page 20 now, okay? And there's the blessing that we said. So we said, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, hama'avir shena me'enai u'tnuma ma'af apai, that you've removed the sleep from my eyes and the slumber from my eyelashes, and may it be your will. Okay, and here's our prayer. May it be your will, Hashem, that you will get us, you'll make us be accustomed to your study, like regular in your study. V'dabkenu b'mitzvotecha, and connect us with your mitzvahs, with your commandments, and don't bring us to a place of sin. Don't bring us to a place of also it's another word for sin, avera ve'avon, v'lo lidei nisayon, v'lo lidei bizayon, and not to a place of being tested, and not to a place of being humiliated, and ve'al tishlot banu yetzer hara, and don't let the evil inclination take over. Okay, so again, different philosophies that we've discussed in the past of what is the evil inclination, what are we standing up against, what are we up and fighting against. But over here, what we're saying, please God, help me. Okay, help me. I'm not strong enough on my own. I need help. What do I need? Keep me away from sin. Keep me away from temptation. Keep me away from a place where I'm going to be in a situation where I'm going to be tested and I may fail. Okay? Keep me away from a place where I'll fail and I will be humiliated. It will become public. People will see and I won't be able to stand, and help me fight the evil inclination. And then it gives us some sort of tip of how to do this. Okay? In the form of prayer. Ve'archikenu me'adam ra. Help us stay away from a bad person. Umechavera, from a bad friend. V'dabkenu b'yetzer hatov u'ma'asim tovim. And put us and help us get closer to our good inclination and to good deeds. V'chofet yitzlenu lishtabed lach, and force our will to want to do good in your name. Okay? This is something that we said, actually, like we talked about more around Yom Kippur time, is I want to make my will God's will. Okay? I want to try to be in sync with God, right? But maybe I'm off. So I'm asking God motivate me, push me in this direction. Give me a nudge in the right direction. Utnenu hayom uv'chol yom, and put us today and every day. Lechen u'lechesed u'rachamim be'enecha u'be'enei kol ro'enu, v'tigmalenu chasadim tovim. Baruch ata Hashem, gomel chasadim tovim l'amo Yisrael. And put us today and every day in a good eye, in a good light, okay, in front of everyone, and in your eyes, and in all of those who we interact with. And you will have charity on us, and bless us with kindness. Bless you, God, the one who gives kindness to His nation. And then there's another Yehi Ratzon, another may it be your will, that has something very similar, that you will help me, that you will help save me today and every day from azei panim, from brazen people, and from brazen faces. Okay, from people who are going to go and do things that are bad, and keep me away from them, and keep me away from a bad man, and from a bad friend, and from a bad neighbor, and from from evil mishaps, and misatana mashchit, from evil demons that will get in my way, from a din kashe umebal din kashe, ben shu ben brit ben sheno ben brit, from a rough judgment and a rough judge, okay, whether he is in your covenant or not, whether he's Jewish or not, whether he's a Noahide or not, keep me away from that, right? So there's something over here which is, we need to try to stay away from bad, from evil, from trouble. Keep your distance from those who are going to bring you, to pull you down with them. We read this in Birkot, okay? It's stay away from a bad neighbor, right? Bad neighbor is not necessarily someone who you picked, right? You moved next door, but he's going to drag you down with him, right? With like, oy l'rasha ve'oy l'shcheno. The wicked man is in trouble, but so is his neighbor, right? And we need to be careful with who we're around. And when I finish saying all of my thank yous, I'm saying, please put me in the right mindset, in the right place, with the right people, and it will make my life easier. With the right rabbi. All right. Any questions about the Birkot today? No? Okay. Wonderful. I'll see you all on Shabbat.
had